In reality, at one point, Studio Gaga will have to finish Berserk. But I want to ask you, if there are no adaptations or no other ways to expand the franchise in terms of what it is they want to do, movies, anime, all that sort of stuff, games, what do they do next? Studio Gaga is a studio. They have funds, they have a business, there are employees, they need to get paid. What does Studio Gaga do next? What is next after Berserk? Think years from now, if the story finally gets finished, everything's done, Koji Mori says, salute, he gets out. What does Studio Gaga do? And there are a couple options, and I think I'd really like to discuss the possibilities of what they would be. Because, believe it or not, there are a lot of things that Miura left behind besides Berserk. Months ago, I made a video about how I read Miura's other manga. His other manga that he made while making Berserk. There were two. He only made a couple chapters of both, and they were actually pretty interesting reads, and I would engage you to go read them yourself. The first one was Gigantomachia. Now, there are other ways to pronounce it, I'm probably saying it wrong, but regardless, Gigantomachia follows the story of Prome and Delos. It takes place 100 million years in the future after the Great Destruction, so it's a post-apocalyptic story, but it's very different from other stuff, and it feels very unique and genuine. Think Dune, but it follows two characters who are trying to rebuild the world because all of its destruction and ash. And that's kind of Gigantomachia. Together, they can create this massive titan called Gora. And if you look at Gigantomachia, it's interesting to see the amount of stuff that is implemented from recent stories. Essentially, it follows Delos, who is a gladiator, but he's also a wrestler. And so when he turns into the giant Gora, he uses wrestling moves. This is a cool story, it is. And it seemed to have a lot of lore, and it had that quality Miura style. Had a lot of detailed art, had a huge, massive Gora Titan that looked so cool. It had rockets on its arms and it would do like sick wrestling moves. There are a lot of videos out there talking about it, and you can go read it yourself on places. Not that many chapters, pretty much just one volume worth, but it's interesting to read and see how there was a lot of setup that could have been continued. And it's a shame that none of these things actually continued, and they never really got cancelled. Many people talk about how it was cancelled, but it never actually was. It was made by the same magazine that makes Berserk, Young Animal, but it was never cancelled. It just stopped because, as you may well know, in 2014, Berserk was still going, and Kentaro Miura, as the man who worked very hard, was working very hard. So it ended up getting put away for a while. That is a possibility the Studio Gaga can continue. And that's something that I think is possible. It doesn't have the same weight as Berserk does. They don't need a supervisor technically. It had the Miura style, but I guess it didn't really have the Miura essence like Berserk does. Berserk is Miura-san's life work, but Gigantomachia is not. It doesn't have the same history. It hasn't been going for decades. And it would be easy to reserialize it because it's actually not that well known a manga. You could start it out from the beginning, from a brand new beginning. You could take the first volume and using it as a prototype, just like Berserk had its own prototype. I really think it'd be a really cool way to start off a new series that still has that cool Miura feel, but is now continued by the apprentices, maybe a new head of the studio. And I don't know how the politics of the manga studios work and how they choose who is the next head honcho, all that sort of stuff. I know a lot of people want Mori to be it, but pretty sure he's got his own studio. He's got his own stories he probably wants to work on after Berserk. You know, the man's talented in his own way, but that is one possibility. The other possibility is a story called Duranki. Duranki is a manga series that was written and produced by Kentaro Miura and illustrated by his personal studio. Under his head, so it has his style again, like with Gigantomachia, but this one is a little bit different. Duranki has a really, really cool style, a cool mythology. It's basically taking a lot of different cool mythological eras and just kind of putting them all together. Unfortunately, it was around this time that Kentaro Miura unfortunately passed away. And that is one of the reasons why Duranki never got finished. But Duranki has a really cool story, and they have since said that they finished it. But if you read the chapters that are available to you, that ending is just as an ending as some other stories that get cliffhangers. The ending of this story is literally just a battle waiting to happen, and then it ends. I wouldn't say it is an ending if so much as a really huge cliffhanger for a character. But it's a cool one. Follows a character called Uzum, who's an androgynous protagonist, and they are a dragon. Well, their name means dragon, but they live in a mythological world and are the only unique human in the entire world that has a mind that is able to look at things in a different way and create technology, and also see things and mystical things that other people wouldn't see. It essentially involves a character that will change the world. The question is for better or for worse, for war or for peace. And it's a really cool small amount of pages. It's got that cool Miura style, like I said. And again, it didn't have that many chapters in terms of like what was happening. You really could pick it up where it left off. And again, it is not a well-known manga, just like Gigantomachia. You could start it straight away. I remember when one of the things doing my research about this manga, apparently when it was announced, people were not happy because they thought it would take away attention from Berserk, which is a fair criticism. It's a fair reason to make. But now being in a different state, again, if Berserk ends, have these two properties, you could continue them. There are many reasons to do it. There aren't that many reasons not to do it. I don't know the rules in terms of what manga is, but if you look at the West and TV shows and movies, think of all the series and all the properties that you never would have thought, yeah, this needed to be rebooted, this needed to be remade, and this needed a sequel series. There was a TV show called Heroes that got cancelled and they brought it back for a final season. There was a TV show called Twin Peaks, then they brought that back for a reunion season 20 years after that show ended. There was a movie called Top Gun and they decided to make a sequel, and it's now like one of the highest grossing box office movies of all time in the domestic of the US. See, it's just like, it's endless. You could reboot anything. You can reboot and remake anything. Doesn't mean you should, but I'd rather they reboot or re-serialize a manga that isn't well known so that it can be well known. It could bring out the studio a new way, saying, hey, you loved Berserk? Boom, check out this. This is what Miura left behind. You know what? We'll finish it and we'll make it our own at the same time. Because, you know, even though these are Miura's ideas, they weren't as fleshed and weren't as sacred as Berserk was. So there isn't as much pressure. You have some playroom. You can try out some cool new stuff. And I think it's something that is definitely worth trying. But I really love to think that they have these opportunities to work with. And maybe this is what Studio Gaga will do next. Now, if they choose to do neither of these, that's totally fine. They want to make something brand new from Studio Gaga. I'm all for it. I'm really excited to see what that would be. I want to see a new Studio Gaga, a new fresh one that comes out swinging creatively. And this is all depending, of course, of what it is that Studio Gaga want to do. And, you know, again, if reserialization is easy, Young Animal is a magazine. They need to be putting out stories along with the other contents of their label, including, you know, dressed up women on the front. There's something that I think is really stuck in my mind is, what is Studio Gaga going to do next? I'm sure they're probably not thinking about that. They were probably thinking it during that crisis of their time of what do we do next? But it's something that I think is worth thinking about in the long run. And I hope that this video ages pretty well or poorly to look back and see, hey, he called it, or I didn't, or neither, or the whole studio got disbanded. I don't know. But regardless, I'd love to see what they can do on their own. And maybe that's something that you, and I hope this makes people think, I'm going to go read this manga until the next chapter of Berserk comes out in the next couple days. I'm gonna read this bad boy. I would urge you to. They're really good reads, especially Duranki. I think Duranki's really cool. Duranki feels like it's got a big world that is just waiting to be explored, and it has different kinds of character interactions you wouldn't find in some other stories, especially modern manga. I would definitely recommend that. That's what I think. What do you guys think? What do you think Studio Gaga should make next? A brand new story, some other property that maybe I've forgotten, that I haven't talked about? Something interesting like that. They could even segue into other forms of manga, one-shots, short stories. Possibilities, a lot of them. Let me know what you think. That's all from me, guys. Appreciate if you watched to the end of the video. My name's Mugen. As always, have a good one.